John just retired and he's wondering if he should be doing a Roth conversion. So we're going to look at his situation and then I'm going to share kind of my thoughts on how I would approach this if I were his advisor. So right here we can see John and you can see he's single, but he's got three kiddos, Jack, Grace, and Samantha. They're all kind of in their mid-20s. And for Samantha, she is actually finishing up her last year of undergraduate school. And so John is 60. And so he's wondering, hey, I'm 60 right now. I just retired and I want to know, should I be doing Roth conversions? So let's take a look at his net worth and kind of overall picture from a financial standpoint. So he's got about 120,000 bucks in cash in the bank. He's got another 2.1 or so spread out between his tax deferred 401k, a little bit in a brokerage, and a little bit there in Roth. So that's the makeup of his portfolio and net worth. He doesn't own a home. He actually rents. He's got a pretty sweet deal on that. And we're going to talk about here in just a second how one of his goals is actually to continue camping, kind of overlanding and traveling around the country doing that, stay in kind of extended periods, different places. So he doesn't want to have a huge mortgage or rent payment somewhere. He'd rather be out traveling and paying very small payments to stay at different campgrounds. So that's one of his big endeavors that he wants to do throughout retirement is kind of travel and just stay different places. So 15,000 bucks is kind of one of the goals he's got there for that. He is retired. He just retired this month. So he's moving forward with that. He was making about $200,000 per year in his job. So for retirement expenses outside of the goal for the camping portion, but then also outside of health costs, which I've got estimated to be about $7,500 every single year before he gets to 65. And then he's got obviously some Medicare stuff and premiums outside of that once he does get to 65 and is on Medicare. Now, $3,000 is what he's wanting to spend on top of those two things. It's kind of like his normal monthly spending for food, gas, just basic items that he needs as a single person. Now, there are some other goals down here at the bottom, and we can see that Samantha's college, she's got a $40,000 goal here for 2025 to finish her out of her undergrad this year. And then he also has Grace maybe getting married here in the near future. So we kind of plugged this in and said, why don't we just push that out to her whenever she's 30? We don't know exactly when this is going to end up being, but we did want to put a goal on the balance sheet and just say, hey, look, at some point we expect to spend some money here for her wedding. So we've got estimated about $75,000 at this point. And then for his son, Jack, he's thinking maybe spend a little bit of money on that too, or might end up having to there. So 25,000 is kind of is what we put on that, and maybe at age 30. So we don't know exactly when that would be. And then two, he said, hey, I might need a new truck or new car at some point. And so we pushed that to about 2032. So he's like, hey, this one's great. I think I can run pretty good on this one for a long time. So no need to buy something immediately. But we put a $50,000 goal in for something there in 2032. And that's going to be obviously adjusting for inflation over time. So that's his retirement spending picture. It's very low overall based on his total net worth, but he does have some larger items here that could impact that and obviously have a need for $2 million or more to pay for these different things. So again, I outlined that his salary was $200,000 or so there before he retired just this month. So he's got a partial year's worth of earnings this year. And for his Social Security, he is going to have about $3,000 a month there at 67. So right now, the plan is to take that at 67. We'll see if that's the right thing here in just a moment. And obviously, he's not saving any money anymore. So that's his situation. Now, let's see if he's able to retire, first of all. And then we're going to look into the Roth conversion question and go from there. So right now, I'm confident in his ability to retire simply because his monthly spending is so low. He doesn't have any large fixed expenses on a monthly basis like a $3,000 mortgage or a huge car payment or something like that. There's no debt in his world right now. So having that there and where he can just basically spend what he needs to every single month is huge. So that allows him to retire with 98% chance of success, which if you've listened to anything I've ever said, this is more than enough in my opinion. If we can be somewhere around 80 to 85, that's a good range because if we're 100%, probability of success like this right here, it means we're not spending enough money. So he has some room and some opportunity to spend more if he ever needs or wants to. So that's a good thing for him and gave him a lot of comfort. Now, if we want to look at a few different things around his tax planning piece, which is really the reason he wanted to ask this question or came to me. So if we want to click on this, I want to go to look at this and see, hey, what are his opportunities here? So let's look at a few different things and break this down. Number one, so we can see a partial year's worth of income this year because he did earn 30-something thousand dollars, I think, so far this year. If we go back to the cash flows, let's look at that really fast. So $35,000 is what he's earned so far here in 2025 for the first quarter of the year. Obviously, that's going away moving forward. And you can see we've got Social Security starting at 67. So if we go back to the tax piece, we can see we're going to pay some income taxes and some FICA taxes here in 2025. Still, that's relatively low. It's a 4.7% effective tax rate. But next year, he's actually paying no taxes. And here's the reason for that. Whenever we go back to look at the net worth picture, we can see that we've got $120,000 in cash, and then we have about $48,000 in the brokerage account. So we've got about 160, 170 stored up in after-tax brokerage or cash accounts, and that is what's going to be spent first based on what the system knows right now. So that's why whenever we come back to the tax portion of this, we can see that there is no income taxes to be paid because the cash or the brokerage accounts is what's being used to pay for his living expenses this year. And then once that's depleted next year, and what is that, would be 2027, this is whenever he would actually begin taking from his tax deferred 401k or IRA because he has no other after tax monies to pull from. And we're going to delay the Roth for now is what the system is planning on. So you can see his tax rate jumps a little bit here. In fact, it goes up, and then we have a couple goals built in, right? Remember the wedding, and remember some weddings for actually both kids, and then also a car payment and kind of buying a new car here. We can see these spikes. And so I want to talk about this specifically here in just a moment as it relates to this Roth conversion question. Now, once all this big spending on the front end for college and these different things kind of go down, we can see that there's actually a little bit of a lower period between 69, 70, and then actually whenever his RMDs would start at 75. So there's a little bit of opportunity maybe here for Roth conversions, but definitely this year and then next year too. So 2 years right here on the front end to do some Roth conversions, and then maybe some on the back end. So let's look at this and see if we can kind of map this out and see what his opportunities might be. So if we come here, we can again see the same chart we just looked at, but now these different lines that you see on screen, these are actually showing you what the different tax brackets are. So you can see next year he would have no income, therefore he has opportunities at the 10%, and that green line is the 12% bracket. Now it goes up after that, so that's when you can see these spikes here. That's actually pretty big spike here in whenever he's 65. So let's see if any Roth conversions are going to be helpful. What I've done is we have not plugged anything in. So right now they're showing no benefit because there's no conversions being kind of mapped out right here. Let's go to the 10% bracket, okay, which would only allow him to do something right here in 2026. But let's see if that's helpful in any capacity for him long term. And the answer is yes. He would actually save a little bit of money in terms of after tax adjusted growth, but then also actual tax savings. We can see that right here. He would pay this much less in taxes over his lifetime due to RMDs being lower, and he would actually have this much more in after-tax adjusted ending assets. So that's the true benefit right there. And but let's go back and let's go here and say instead of the 10%, this is helpful, right? But not monumental. It doesn't alter his life a whole bunch. Let's bump that to the 12% bracket and refresh again. Okay, so now we've tripled this, and so now we've got $130,000 of benefit. And so if we come here, we can kind of zoom in and check this out. That green shade, that is the one that's actually telling us how much to convert. So ignore this little piece that's like slivered in right here. What that does is it just jumps to the next tax year, and there's no conversions here. There's only a conversion in 2025, which is this year, and then 2026, and that's next year. So that's to fill up the 12% bracket. If we look at the details of that, we can convert that amount of money from each of those places because, again, he's got a taxable account, at least for a little bit, because he's going to be taken from there to spend down for his living expenses and also meet some of his goals specifically in 2025 to help pay for college. So you can see that the withdrawal from the tax deferred account, that is the conversion amount. So he's not actually, there's a little bit of leftover here that he's going to be spending from the tax deferred account in 2026. But this is the amount he would convert. So about $68,000 or so over the next 2 years. And what that would do is that would save him this much money in taxes long term. Okay. So that's a good thing. That's a positive. Now let's keep kind of going here and see if there's any additional benefit to go into the 22% bracket. And there actually is. So $321,000 is now this new after-tax adjusted ending balance by doing conversions up to that 22% bracket. What you can see is it actually creates more conversions throughout his life. And going back to this kind of period between 67, 8, or 9, up until his RMDs begin at 75, we can see that there's some room to do some conversions here. So if we, and obviously these first couple of years too, but if we look back at the details of this, we can see there's years in which you can do multiple conversions, and you can see what the amounts might be. These are obviously projections, and so we'd want to analyze this every single year. But for sure, these first couple of years, there's an opportunity to do those conversions, and actually a large amount. And you can see, again, that's the difference between doing conversion and not doing conversion. That's the benefit of doing that in his scenario. If we look back here, we can see he's going to pay that much less in taxes throughout the rest of his life. He's also going to have this much less that's going to be taken from his tax deferred account. So what this is saying is if you convert that amount of money, your RMDs in the future were going to be that much more or less, which leads to this much less paid in taxes. So that's kind of like how you can evaluate this and say, because we're not growing more tax deferred money, because that is now in the Roth, we're going to pay this much less taxes, which can only lead to that much more in tax adjusted ending assets at the end of his life, which could go to the kids and be more tax efficient for them. So I want to point out one thing here around Irma specifically. So let's look at this. Let's say that we go back and we're going to put this back to no conversions, refresh this. Okay. And now instead of the tax brackets, I want to look at the Medicare premium tax bracket. So Irma is what we're going to be looking at here. And we can see that obviously he's not 65 yet, so Irma won't apply. But once he does turn 65, these brackets right here are going to be telling you how much of a Irma surcharge he could have to pay. And you can see right here on the right, whenever you're doing this, you can look at the first bracket is at $119,000 at 65. That would be an additional $88 a month, and it goes up from there. So if he has higher than those income amounts in those years or 2 years ago, because Irma always looks back to what your tax return said in terms of your AGI or your modified adjusted gross income 2 years previous, then you would have to pay an additional amount. And you can see here on screen those amounts, what they are, and at least in 2025, those could be adjusted every single year, as well as the income brackets are going up on these every single year as they adjust for inflation. So remember that Irma is always looking back 2 years to see what you earned 2 years ago, and then that is going to be determined if you have to pay taxes or a surcharge on your Medicare premiums in the current year. So 2025, these numbers are based on what you earned in 2023. So that's something that's important to pay attention to. But until he gets to 65, there's no Irma issues to worry about. Once he does get there, you can see these two spikes specifically, right? So this one here, we got maybe weddings in this year, but also we've got a car payment or a new car or something else popping in these different years. So what could happen is if he doesn't do conversions, and the majority of his assets are in tax deferred accounts, the only way to meet that $75,000 goal for the wedding or $50,000 car goal is to take that money from his tax deferred accounts, which means that would push him above the Irma surcharge brackets, and that would cause him to pay additional premiums on his Medicare in those specific years because he has no other place to pull the income from. So the point I want to make here is this. Whenever we think about retirement before 65, most people are concerned about their premiums on their private healthcare insurance and actually finding a way to lower their income so that they can get subsidies, which would reduce their premiums while they're on that private insurance until they get to 65. Now, that's a good idea. I want to make sure that we do that, and we need to be aware of it. And there's opportunities there to have reduced medical insurance premiums, but at what cost? So if we don't do conversions, we can reduce our income down as much as we can and see if there's any opportunities for, ACA subsidies on those different plans or policies that we have for our health insurance. But if we do that, there could be a ramification in the future that would push us into Irma surcharge brackets both now, but if we look to the right a little bit, forever. Right. So if we don't do conversions, we could be in Irma surcharges forever. Once we get to RMD age, you can see those RMDs kick in. And then now he's paying surcharges for the rest of his life because of his RMDs being so large, which is a taxable source, which goes into your modified adjusted gross income. So what I want to say is this. Don't look so short-sighted around your health insurance premiums and say, I want to get the subsidies right now today before I get to 65, so I want to lower my income as much as possible, and then not do Roth conversions, which could make you end up paying Irma surcharges for the rest of your life if you're not aware of that. So here's the thought for you. What if we actually paid a little bit extra for our premiums on health insurance right now today and did some conversions? What that would do is that would give him the opportunity in these specific years right here where we have additional funding needs or things we've got to pay for, we could actually pull that money out of a Roth if we really wanted to and keep our income under a certain amount to hopefully stay under these Irma surcharge brackets. But if we don't do the conversions now and pay a little bit higher premiums on our private health insurance, then we definitely don't have that opportunity in the future. So let's actually look at this. And I want to show you if we do the same thing in terms of going back and filling up that 22% bracket. So we're going to do the conversions now. What we can see is this. The system right now is still saying, okay, so the green is the conversion amount. The system is still saying that we would pull the amount that we need for the weddings out of tax deferred accounts. I'm not going to be able to change that for a specific year, but what I'm saying as an advisor, I would say, hey, John, let's look at this. Let's do some conversions. You would have ability to pull money from your Roth IRAs in these specific years right here and right here, and you could stay under surcharge brackets in those years if we have money in the Roth. Right now, we don't have enough money in the Roth to do that at this point to fund all the different goals. In addition to that, we can see that your your actual brackets for Irma forever are actually going to be below, if you look at the green, that's going to be below what it would otherwise be if we don't do conversions. So you would be paying less in Irma surcharges in the future if we decide that we need to do Roth conversions. So that's part of this as well. Whenever we look at, it's not just a tax savings, it also is a income reduction possibility for you, which could actually lower your overall health insurance premiums the rest of your life. So here's a few takeaways for you. Number one, we need to do Roth conversions when we have the opportunity. In John's situation, he's really got two primary years to do conversions, okay? Because these are the ones where he can actually convert and then also pay the taxes out of cash before he depletes all of his taxable account money, which he's living on and paying taxes with. And they would have to start pulling from his tax deferred accounts like his IRA. So he's only got a couple years here. He better take advantage of them. Addition to that, he's got these different years, which I'm going to call evaluation years. So once you get there, you don't know what's going to happen. I love projection software, but here's the problem. It doesn't know what the future holds. All these things are going to be incorrect, at least in some capacity. So we have to kind of say, hey, look, whenever we get to this point, and kind of really every year, we're going to evaluate, should we do Roth conversions or not? And if so, how much should we be doing? So that's one of the things we've got to look at. Now, what I've not talked about just yet is asset location. Okay, so here's what we want to look at next. If we kind of put this back to ordinary income tax brackets, we can see, boom, we do conversions, maybe some conversions here. But asset location is whenever we hold certain types of investments in certain account types based on how those account types are taxed. So an IRA is always going to be paying normal income taxes whenever you distribute money out of it. A taxable brokerage account is going to have either long-term capital gains or short-term capital gains or qualified or non-qualified dividends or interest that's coming into the account. Those types of different, qualified gains or dividends or interest, those are all taxed differently depending on what they are. And what's going to happen there is those brokerage accounts, they pay taxes every single year. So it makes more sense to hold more tax advantageous investments in a taxable brokerage account. And then for a Roth, we want to have as much of the equity or stock that we can in that account because we want that money to grow tax-free for as long as possible. So the compounding actually grows more and more tax-free. That's the benefit of the account. So invest it correctly. Now, that's what's called asset location. Make sure we invest correctly in each account type. So if we change this from a pro rata distribution, which is what it's set on right now, so there's an equal distribution in terms of percentages across each account type. If we change that to be more tax advantageous in terms of asset location, we would actually switch this to where our tax-free accounts, which is our Roth, is going to have all stock. Okay. Our taxable account, for now at least, is going to have all stock. And then any bonds, fixed income, or cash-based assets, those are going to be in the tax deferred IRAs. And so what that does is that meet your asset location goals that you should probably be following. And then in addition to that, having your fixed income or your low growth type assets in your traditional IRAs or your 401k that's tax deferred, what you're going to have is you're going to actually curb the amount of growth that's in the account while you're doing that so that you don't build up a larger RMD problem for yourself in the future. So it actually limits how much growth you're going to have in the account, which is a good thing for you because you want to eliminate or reduce how much money you have in those accounts so your RMDs are not outrageous like we're trying to do with Roth conversions. So all that to say, I'm going to refresh it here and you're going to see a big jump. Okay. So about $600,000 of tax adjusted ending assets at the end of his life is going to be the difference simply by making sure we do some conversions and then also do asset location correctly. And in John's situation, it might mean to pay higher premiums before he gets to 65 so that we can do some conversions. And that way he can avoid or lower how much Irma he has to pay throughout the rest of his life once he does get to 65. So hopefully this gives you some ideas around how you can think about Roth conversions for your situation and maybe apply them specifically to your unique needs. I'd love to hear your comments down below and kind of say, hey, Jacob, here's something I'm doing in my situation. That way other people just like you can learn from what you're thinking and doing. And then other than that, I hope you have a great day and we'll see you in the next video.